What happens when one of the most powerful media companies in the Philippines is suddenly taken off the air? For decades, ABS-CBN was more than a television network. It was a household name, a news source, an entertainment powerhouse, and a major part of Filipino culture. But in 2020, its free-to-air broadcast operations were forced to stop after Congress rejected the renewal of its franchise. How did ABS-CBN rise from a small radio and television company to one of the Philippines' biggest media empires? And why did its broadcast empire fall? This is the story of ABS-CBN. The story of ABS-CBN began shortly after World War II. In 1946, American engineer James Lindenberg established Balaneo Electronics Corporation, a company involved in radio and television technology. At the time, television was still new in the Philippines, and only a small number of Filipino households owned television sets. In 1953, the company launched one of the country's earliest television stations. It became known as ABS, or Alto Broadcasting System. Television was expensive, technically difficult, and available mostly in urban areas. But ABS understood that broadcasting could become a powerful way to reach millions of Filipinos. The company began producing news, entertainment, variety programs, and public service content, laying the foundation for a future media giant. In the 1950s, Filipino businessman Eugenio Lopez Sr. and his brother, Fernando Lopez, entered the broadcasting industry. Their company, Chronicle Broadcasting Network, or CBN, became another important player in Philippine radio and television. In 1957, the Lopez family acquired ABS. The two broadcasting operations were eventually combined, creating ABS-CBN. This merger brought together technology, programming, news, and business resources. Over time, ABS-CBN expanded its television reach and became one of the country's most influential broadcasters. By the 1960s, television was becoming more common in Filipino homes. ABS-CBN was no longer simply an experiment in broadcasting. It was becoming a national institution. ABS-CBN's success came from understanding Filipino audiences. Its programs combined news, drama, comedy, music, sports, and public affairs. The network also invested in transmitters and regional stations, allowing it to reach viewers outside Metro Manila. For many Filipinos, ABS-CBN became part of everyday life. Families gathered around the television for evening dramas. Children watched cartoons and variety programs. Millions followed election coverage, breaking news, and major national events through the network. The company's influence grew beyond television. It entered radio, film, music, talent management, publishing, and international distribution. ABS-CBN was becoming not just a broadcaster, but a complete entertainment and media ecosystem. But ABS-CBN's rise was interrupted by one of the most important political events in Philippine history. In 1972, President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law. Private media organizations were shut down or placed under government control. ABS-CBN was among the networks taken off the air. Its facilities and broadcast operations were seized. For years, the network that had reached millions of Filipinos was silent. This period showed the vulnerability of media companies when political power and broadcasting are closely connected. Even a successful and popular network could be removed from the public airwaves by government action. In 1986, the People Power Revolution ended the Marcos regime. The Lopez family eventually regained control of ABS-CBN, and the network returned to the air. The return of ABS-CBN was symbolic. It represented the restoration of private broadcasting and the reopening of space for independent media. The network quickly rebuilt its operations. It upgraded studios, expanded nationwide coverage, hired new talent, and developed programs that connected strongly with Filipino viewers. The company also benefited from the growth of television advertising and the increasing popularity of locally produced entertainment. During the late 1980s and 1990s, ABS-CBN entered one of the most successful periods in its history. ABS-CBN became known for producing some of the Philippines' most popular television programs. Its dramas created national stars. Its variety programs became cultural events. Its news division developed a powerful national presence. The network also expanded internationally, creating channels and content for Filipinos living overseas. This global Filipino audience became an important source of revenue and influence. ABS-CBN's strength came from its combination of three things: strong programming, a nationwide broadcast network, and a loyal audience. At its peak, the company was one of the most recognized Filipino brands in the world. But its success also created powerful competitors and growing political tension. ABS-CBN's dominance was challenged by competitors, especially GMA Network. The two networks competed for viewers, advertising revenue, exclusive talent, and program ratings. At the same time, ABS-CBN invested heavily in studios, transmitters, technology, international operations, and new businesses. Large media companies require enormous spending to create content and maintain nationwide infrastructure. The company also faced the financial pressures that come with expansion. Media businesses depend heavily on advertising, and advertising revenue can decline during economic crises or political uncertainty. ABS-CBN remained powerful, but its size also made it vulnerable. It needed constant investment, stable regulation, and continued access to the broadcast frequencies that carried its programs into Filipino homes. In the 2010s, ABS-CBN became increasingly involved in political controversy. Critics accused the network of unfair or biased coverage. Supporters argued that ABS-CBN was being targeted because of its reporting and its political influence. The network denied that it had acted improperly and defended its journalism. The conflict became more intense during the administration of President Rodrigo Duterte. Duterte repeatedly criticized ABS-CBN and its owners. The dispute focused on political coverage, alleged bias, and a campaign advertisement issued during the 2016 election period. ABS-CBN also faced questions about its franchise and regulatory compliance. The company maintained that it had not violated the law and that its franchise renewal should be approved. ABS-CBN's broadcast franchise expired in May 2020. Because Congress had not yet approved a renewal, the National Telecommunications Commission ordered the network to stop its television and radio broadcasts. ABS-CBN went off the air. The shutdown happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, when millions of Filipinos were relying on television and radio for news, public health information, and entertainment. The closure immediately became a national issue. Supporters said the network was being punished for political reasons. Opponents argued that the company had legal and regulatory issues that needed to be addressed. The House of Representatives held hearings on the franchise application. ABS-CBN executives answered questions about ownership, advertising, its franchise history, and alleged violations. In July 2020, the House committee rejected the franchise renewal application. Without a renewed franchise, ABS-CBN could not resume its nationwide free-to-air television and radio operations. The consequences were immediate and painful. Thousands of employees and workers connected to ABS-CBN's broadcast operations were affected. Programs were canceled or moved to other platforms. Advertising campaigns were redirected to competitors and digital media. The shutdown also affected actors, writers, directors, technicians, camera operators, production crews, suppliers, and independent businesses that depended on the network. For viewers, the loss was emotional. Some people felt that a familiar part of Filipino life had disappeared. Others believed the shutdown was a necessary consequence of unresolved legal and political issues. Whatever their position, the event demonstrated how important ABS-CBN had become and how quickly a media empire could lose its most valuable asset, access to the public airwaves. The end of ABS-CBN's free-to-air broadcasts did not mean the complete end of the company. ABS-CBN continued producing films, television programs, news content, and digital videos. It expanded its presence on social media and online platforms. The company also formed partnerships that allowed some of its programs to reach viewers through other television channels. Its content continued to appear through cable, satellite, streaming, and digital distribution. But the business was fundamentally different. ABS-CBN no longer controlled the same nationwide free-to-air network that had made it a household giant. Its transformation reflected a larger change in media. Audiences were moving from traditional television to mobile phones, streaming platforms, and social media. ABS-CBN's story is not simply a story of success and failure. It is a story of technology, politics, family business, public trust, and national culture. It began as a pioneering broadcaster when television was still new in the Philippines. It survived dictatorship, returned after the People Power Revolution, and grew into one of the country's most influential media companies. But its dependence on a government franchise made it vulnerable. Political conflict, regulatory questions, intense competition, and the changing media industry all contributed to its decline as a free-to-air broadcaster. ABS-CBN may have lost its place on traditional television, but its content, artists, journalists, and audience continue to exist in new forms. The bigger question is this: in a digital age, does a media company need a television network to remain powerful? The story of ABS-CBN is still being written.